Okay, so the dominoes. Fredonian Rebellion, Hayden Edwards, the stupid trying to get East Texas independent from Mexico. That's the first one. Uh, Mexico City gets very concerned. It realizes that it's lost track of Anglo Texas, so it sends Tehran up to Texas to take a look around. That's the second domino. He comes up, he sees that East Texas and Nacogdoches is more U.S. than it is Mexican, and he says Mexico needs to act now or Texas will be lost forever. That's the third domino. Then the law of April 6th, 1830, which are based on his recommendations. That's the fourth domino, and very, very significant in that colonization now is outlawed, although Austin is allowed to bring the folks that he'd already contracted to. There's a, there is a, some colonists are able to come in, they're grandfathered, but ultimately colonization from the U.S., including slaves, is just going to be completely shut down very quickly, by the way. Um, uh, Mexico is going to send up more soldiers into Texas. It's going to create customs forts on Texas rivers to try to grab a piece of the revenue from cotton. They're going to start trying to tax cotton going out and goods coming in, and also patrol Texas a little bit more heavily. Um, so things are starting to really accelerate. Now, after the law of April 6, 1830, what happens is you have a new generation of Americans coming into Texas. And it's funny to talk about generations because this is such a short time period. You know, Austin's only been in Texas for 10 years. But what happens is that the law of April 6, 1830 radicalizes some Americans and some Texans. And the classic example of this is William B. Travis, who comes into Texas in early 1831. Travis was from South Carolina. He was a lawyer. Of course, he's going to die at the Alamo, as most of you probably know. Um, he he was married to a woman named Rosanna Cato at the age of 19. They had a son, and then she became pregnant again. Travis was convinced that the second pregnancy, the father was not, he was not the father. So he kills the person he thinks is the father, either in a duel or it's a little bit murky. And after that, he comes to Texas, and he registers himself as single, although he's still married. So he's coming into Texas under kind of mysterious circumstances, one step ahead of the law. And he comes into Texas probably illegally, by the way, because he's in 1831. So Travis isn't illegal. He comes into Texas and he sets up shop in a town called Anahuac. And Anahuac is the largest community in Mexican or Anglo Texas. It's part of the Anglo colony or the Stephen F. Austin colony. And he immediately begins stirring up trouble. Um, he 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 opposes the law of April 6, 1830. He starts arguing that Texas should break from Mexico, which is something that Austin's nowhere near doing this. And Travis at this point is still pretty radical in arguing from the break of Texas from Mexico. But he exemplifies a group of Anglo Americans who are in Texas who have no respect for the Mexican government. They have no desire to make Texas work within Mexico. They're not going to learn Spanish. They're not going to become Roman Catholic. They want a complete break with Mexico. Initially, they're a minority. Over time, though, they will gain a lot of adherents. And we're only 6 years away from the Mexican Revolution. Travis gets into trouble. He gets thrown in jail because he tries this trick to he tries to trick the Mexican government into returning some runaway slaves that had come into Texas from Louisiana. He tries to trick the Mexican government and to returning those slaves. The reason he does it is he's going to get a big reward if those slaves are returned. He fails. He's put in jail. And this is where we start having tensions grow between the Mexican government and Texans, and this is where some of the first fighting occurs, as some of Travis's adherents, they actually are willing to fight the Mexican soldiers in order to free Travis. Um, so Travis comes in and he starts stirring up the pot in Anahuac. Anahuac is located where the Brazos River goes into the Gulf of Mexico. Um, and as a result of all this, what we're seeing is this radicalization. These new Americans are coming into Texas. People like Travis, they're stirring up trouble. They're stirring up the pot. They have no respect for the Mexican government. In fact, they want Texas to break from Mexico, and it's causing all kinds of bad feelings between Mexico City and the folks in Texas. So what happens is that in early 1833 you have a convention. And this convention, it's made up of Anglos and some of their Tejano allies. And this is one of the big points that Crisp is making, that you did have Tejanos working with Anglos against the Mexican government. That it wasn't just an Anglo revolt. Really what we have is a Texas revolt. And they meet in April of 1833, and what they do is they want some reforms to the Constitution of Mexico. First of all, they want the law of April 6th, 1830, they want it rescinded. They want it to go away. They also want, which is something that Anglos had wanted for a long time, they wanted Texas to be a standalone state. They wanted Texas to be a separate state, separate from Coahuila, because to do business in Saltillo was just too much of a hassle. So they want Texas to be a standalone state. They want the law of April 6th, 1830. They want it rescinded. They want to restart the immigration of Anglos from the United States into Mexican Texas. They want it to start going again. Of course, they want slavery protected in Texas. And they sign a petition that they have Stephen F. Austin deliver to the Mexican government in Mexico City. And by this time, Stephen F. Austin is at a low ebb. Many of the Anglos in Texas have lost a lot of respect for him. They think that Austin has not been tough enough with Mexico City, that Austin is not representing the interest of Anglos in Texas. And they give him this petition, and one settler wrote, Austin is closely watched, and his future prospects depend greatly upon his conduct in this matter, delivering this petition to Mexico City. If he succeeds, he'll do well for himself, and if for the want of proper exertion on his part it should fail, Colonel Austin is a ruined man in Texas. So Stephen F. Austin goes to Mexico City in 1833 under a lot of pressure from Anglos in Texas to try to get Mexico City to rethink its policies towards Texas. Now, what I want you to note is this is not the Texas Revolution. These are Texans trying to get Mexico City to change its ways, to change its policies. And if Mexico City will do that, if it will allow Americans back into Texas, if it will protect slavery in Texas, if it will allow Texas to become an independent state separate from Coahuila but within the Mexican nation, then these Anglos will be very happy to stay in Mexico. But these are the conditions that they set. So Austin arrives in Mexico City in the summer of 1833, this emissary from Anglo Texas, and he has some meetings with the Mexican government, but when all is said and done, Mexico City will not budge. they're not going to give in to any of the demands of the Anglos in Texas. No separate state. The law of April 6th stays in force. The Mexico is just going to strengthen its forts in Texas. Nothing the Anglos want, they get from Mexico City. Um, and so Austin he heads back to Texas, and Mexican Texas, and he realizes that his mission is a failure. And he does something which is pretty unusual because he was usually kind of clear headed and moderate. He sits down and he writes a letter and he says, look, Texas needs to break from Coahuila, even if Mexico City says no. That Texas has to be an independent state. Now, again, understand, Austin isn't talking about Texas breaking from Mexico. He's talking about Texas breaking from Coahuila and becoming an independent state within Mexico. This is a big issue in Texas at the time. Well, the letter that he wrote where he said Texas should break from Coahuila, even without the permission of Mexico City, spies capture it. Austin is hauled back to Mexico City, and he's put in jail. And he doesn't show up back into Texas until late 1835, just on the eve of the Texas Revolution. So again, these dominoes falling as Texas is becoming Anglo-Texans are becoming more and more alienated from Mexico City. But remember, it's not just Anglo-Texans, and this is one of the points that Chris makes. It's also Tejanos in Texas, especially Tejano elites who have worked very closely with Austin. They're becoming very frustrated with Mexico City as well.